Jai Hind, dear friends. Firstly, thank you for all the love and appreciation you have displayed towards this project. I do hope that you are in the best of your spirits and becoming better every day, energetically looking forward to your upcoming exam. It has been a long gap after which we are resuming the series for learning and revising Indian polity through MCQs. So, like all other videos of this series, let us take 10 more questions in this video and learn little more of the system of governance in India, which you aspire to become a part of very soon, or at least should be well aware as a citizen. It will be beneficial if you keep your copy of the Constitution of India close for reference as we move along. I also recommend you please pause the video as the question is displayed. Answer the question yourself and only then proceed to listen. This is how I think you will improve your ability to recall as well as develop interconnections in your knowledge base. Because see, knowing just the answer is not the goal for us here. The answer you will find out anyway. And in this video and the next one, on the right hand side, you will see the emblems or seals of the different state governments of India. See if you can identify them. That's the parallel learning for this video. Lastly, I strongly suggest to complete this video and especially capture the end lesson. The idea is to help you revise some random concepts, but even more to assist in expanding our horizons and learning at a slightly philosophical and macro level. So, even if you wish to skip some part of my talk here, do watch it till the end by skipping, or much better option of increasing the speed. Alright, so let us take the first question. And that is the Comptroller and Auditor General of India has a duty to compile the accounts of all the states in our country except just one of them. Now, there's an act, I'm sure you know, the Comptroller and Auditor General Duties, Powers and Conditions of Service Act of the year 1971. It empowers the President as well as the Governor of a state to relieve the C&AG from certain responsibilities. This is where in 1976, I'm sure we all know, that the compilation of accounts of the Union was divested from the C&AG and a new office of the CGA, that is the Comptroller General of Accounts, was created for Union accounts. Further, the CAG does not compile the accounts of the Union territories also, okay, except the two Union territories, that is Chandigarh as well as Dadra and Nagar Haveli, which is now Dadra and Nagar Haveli and Daman and Diu. So except these two Union territories, the CAG also does not compile accounts for the other Union territories also. So that is something you should know. Similarly, the Act also provides that the Governor of a state may, with the previous approval of the President and after consultation with the CAG, by order, relieve the CAG from the responsibility of compiling the said accounts of the state or of any particular department of the state, right? Accordingly, the Governor of Goa in 1989 took the prior approval of the President, relieved the CAG from the responsibility of preparation of accounts of Goa. So Goa is only one state in India where the accounts are not compiled by the CAG. An important thing you should note that in all these cases, the CAG has been relieved from the responsibility of preparation of the finance accounts, right? But the CAG still is responsible for its submission, okay? For its submission and to be laid before the Parliament or the state or the UT legislature. That is why you'll see that even today when the finance account is submitted, it has the signature of the CAG, even though compilation is not the responsibility of the CAG. If you could not understand, listen to what I just said again. Go back and listen to it. And I hope you realized the first state we have here, whose state emblem you are able to see here, Andhra Pradesh. And see, I think it was a big revelation for many of you, the very first question in this resumed version of MCQ series. Anyhow, so for the future of these emblems, I'm not going to mention them. You make a guess yourself, answer will be revealed at the end of the question. Anyhow, so keep following. Okay, so the next question is, under the Citizenship Act of 1955, which of the following are ways in which the citizenship of a citizen of India may be terminated? So how does one lose the citizenship of India? This is actually a straightforward question. You'll see that the first three words here, renunciation, termination and deprivation. There is nothing called cancellation of a citizenship as such, even though you may think it means termination of some kind, but officially this is not a word. This is where your sections 8, 9 and 10 of this act come into the picture. In the Citizenship Act. Not a difficult question. We all should be knowing this, and almost half of you got it right. I'm really not that greatly satisfied with the performance of so many of you, because these are straightforward questions. So let's get better, because it's now close to less than 2 months for the exam. Okay, so moving on to the next one. Which of the following statements are valid conditions for termination of the Indian citizenship? Okay, so how can the Indian citizenship be terminated? Now you see, if somebody is ordinarily resident out of India for 7 years, or if they are disloyal to the constitution or the country, or they don't have certificate of birth. Now this third one, I'm sure you know, in all the drama that has happened regarding the recent Constitutional Amendment Act, there's nothing like that. Otherwise also you know that a person may not be born in India and can still be a citizen of India, right? Because there is a principle of jus sanguinis also, the right of blood. So a child born to Indian parents outside Indian territory may also be a citizen of India. So this is anyway absolutely rubbish kind of a sentence. Now the other two, they're actually a valid reason, but that is not for termination of the citizenship, but that is for the deprivation of the citizenship. And that is applicable only to the naturalized citizens. Okay, only to the naturalized citizens. So these are elaborated in section 10 of the Citizenship Act. Know that, understand this very clearly, that the citizenship of a natural citizen, okay, natural citizen, can be terminated only on one ground. That is, if the citizen has taken up citizenship of another country and has not renounced it. Okay. And since the question is about a citizen in general, the statements do not hold true. Okay, if it was for deprivation, where somebody is getting it through the method of registration or naturalization, that is what is called naturalized citizen, then their citizenship can be taken. Remember, your citizenship, if you are a natural citizen of India, nobody can take away your citizenship unless either you give it up yourself or you take another citizenship and don't give up Indian citizenship. No matter which crime you commit, otherwise you are always going to be a citizen, maybe a bad citizen, but you are still a citizen. Okay, now my advice, it has been an extremely dramatic year on the subject of citizenship. All of us know that. Okay, so be prepared for some questions on citizenship. I would recommend to quickly read through the relevant sections of the Act yourself, and definitely section 3 to section 10. These sections where the acquisition and the losing of Indian citizenship is discussed. Other sections you can quickly take a read as an overview. I'm sure it will be helpful, and is not that time intensive also. It's just essentially 8 sections I'm asking you to read. Quickly just read through that and see the performance is not that great. These are very basic questions that I have put up. We are still in the warm-up phase. So I am sure we'll be performing better in times to come. Next question is, which of the following animals form a part of the state emblem of India? Well, I mean, this is not really something I wish to discuss. It's in front of you also, and I'm sure by now you would have all seen it through. This emblem is kind of a changed version of the Sarnath capital, where the 4 lions are there. Of course, in the state emblem that we adopted, there are only 3 lions because we don't see the reverse side of it. So actually on the lion capital, all 4 of these exist. Of course, the 4 lions, the horse and the bull that you can see even in this frontal view, which is actually the emblem. Elephant happens to be on the reverse side, on the back side of it, which is hidden, which is not part of the emblem, but it is part of the lion capital. Boss, you are going to become part of Government of India. This is a symbol you are all going to adorn on your desk, on your car, and if you're an IPS, on your shoulders as well. Look at it carefully. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Which of the following acts provided for bicameral legislature in India? A straightforward question, not a surprise. Many of you did get it right. The Government of India Act 1919. This is when, the Indian Legislative Council, it was replaced by a bicameral legislature, okay, consisting of the Council of State, which is actually the upper house, and the Legislative Assembly, which was the lower house. Nothing extraordinary. It's decently factual kind of a question, but important, and a lot of you got it right, much better than the previous questions. So let us keep going to the next question. The Government of India Act 1935 vested the residuary powers. Okay, so residuary powers, we all understand, when a subject is not mentioned in any of the lists of the center or the state. Now, in the Constitution of India, we all know the residuary power, which is referred in Article 248, as well as, in the list 1, these are the last entries, that all residuary powers will be vested with the Union, which means Parliament, and the Union Executive will have the power to make laws and executive policies, etc. Now, in the 1935 Act, from which this concept of residuary power kind of flew, but in that case, it was with the Governor General. The Governor General of India, they were vested with the residuary powers. Again, a decently factual question, but it's important for you to know this. Neither the center or the states, none of them had the residuary power. It was the Governor General of India. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Which of the following is or are the features of parliamentary form of government? Well, I mean, again and again we keep discussing these questions. It's a decently straightforward. The most essential component of parliamentary form of government is that the executive is responsible to the legislature. Okay, everything else is secondary. In fact, the statements here, executive is responsible to judiciary. No, they have no responsibility to the judiciary. And similarly, legislature is responsible to judiciary. Not at all. Legislature, if theoretically also, philosophically also, legislature would be responsible to the citizens of India, right? And how can you have an elected team or elected body being responsible to some appointed handful of judges, no matter how learned they are, right? So that word responsible does not hold for judiciary at all. So essentially it is just 1 point that you should have marked. Otherwise this was not that difficult a question. Very nice. 4/5 of you, 80% roughly have got it right. That is the symbol, that is the emblem for the state government of Goa. So the next question is, an Indian citizen was denied a public office due to her or his religion. Which of their fundamental rights have been violated? Now, the answer is, actually, I'm very happy that a lot of you got it right, but not so many. Because of the word religion, many of you would have thought of freedom of religion, but nobody is stopping them from practicing their religion. So there's no impact on the right to freedom of religion. Exploitation, freedom, nothing is like that. Essentially, it is right to equality, and in that specific, Article 16. I want you to open your Biract or whatever app you have and go and read clause 2. It will say that no citizen shall, on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, descent, place of birth, residence. Now, please note that residence also be ineligible for or discriminated against in any employment under the state. That is exactly what has happened. So it's a violation of the right to equality. Okay. Now see, this article here is very important in the background of some states like Haryana, who have made reservation for state domicile persons in private sector recently. You must have read the ordinance, etc. Andhra Pradesh also. See, such measures are not in conflict with this Article 16 clause 2, because residence as a ground for discrimination is prohibited only from public employment. Okay, from private employment, this at least does not stop you. Yes, you may have other considerations of efficiency and other kind of issues if reservation is being provided for the state domiciled people in the private sector. But at least the Constitution in Article 16 clause 2 does not prohibit any of that. So just make sure you are clear on these aspects. So we move on to the next question, and that is a writ petition in case of violation of a fundamental right can be presented before. A very straightforward question. We know it is both because under Article 32 as well as Article 226 of the Constitution, the writ jurisdiction of Supreme Court we know is its original jurisdiction. That means somebody can file the original case itself in Supreme Court, but it is not exclusive jurisdiction, because one may approach even the High Court there. And very nice, I'm very pleased with this kind of performance. Very good. But even the other 15%, you need to catch up. These are very basic concepts. You cannot be confused in these things. All right. So the last question for this video: which of the following statements is or are not correct? Mind it, not correct, regarding the legislations made with respect to a matter enumerated in the concurrent list under the 7th schedule of the Constitution of India. So we know in concurrent list, both center and state, they both can make the law. So the relevant article here, if you are not aware, please read it once. Article 254, they're just, 2 clauses and 1 proviso there. You read it carefully. There is nothing extraordinary in this question as such. So yes, Parliament can repeal a law made by the legislature of the state. This is in the proviso that I was telling you earlier in Article 254. And if the law made by the legislature of the state was passed before the law made by the Parliament, then the law made by state will prevail. No, this is incorrect. We know that the only situation the law of the state can prevail over the parliamentary law is when the state law was reserved for the consideration of president and president has granted assent, which simply means it can overrule the center only when the center accepts it that way. When center allows it to overrule, then it can overrule. Anyway, read that. So since this is correct and the question was which is not correct, second alone should be the correct answer for you. So these were the 10 questions for today. Like every time, I've got a quick end lesson for you here, and that is the organic state. By the way, the performance on the last question needs to improve. This is again something very basic. The organic state, the concept of Saptanga, which means the 7 elements. Okay, Saptanga means the 7 elements, which Kautilya called Prakritis, right? Prakritis, which is what defines a state. And in his book Arthashastra. So it's very simple to understand this from a quick diagram which I took online. So I must give credit to Mr. Prabhakar Jha. So of course you have the Swami, as Kautilya would say, the king. Then you'll have Mantri, that is the minister. Then it's the Janapad, which is not really the territory. It is territory plus the people in that territory, which is the modern definition of the state as well, right? That there should be territory and people. So this is the Janapad. Then you have the Durg, which is the fort, the fortification, the Kosh, which is the treasury, which is actually the wheel, which is what the whole concept of Arthashastra was based on. The Sena, which is the army, also called the Dand, right? And of course the allies, the Mitra, as Kautilya called it. Anyway, this was just to give you a quick interesting thought over components of the organic state, how it can perform well. All these elements have to come together. And with that, thank you very much. I will see you very soon with 10 more questions. We'll make it a habit to make a video every day. I hope it was helpful. See you soon. Thank you very much.